Anything Can Happen Friday, the art and culture side of Southeast Asia. Hello and welcome back to Duran ASEAN. You're with Gowri.
And Anything Can Happen Friday. You're with Grace.
So, as always, today is a Friday and we bring you the art and cultural side of Southeast Asia for our discussion. And today is no different. Today we have a special guest in the studio, someone that I have personally admired for many years now. And I'm so glad that he's finally here. He made it. And, of course, I'm talking about Mr. Joseph Gonzales, who is a prominent figure in the performing arts industry in Penang. So let's say, in KL. Let's say good morning to him. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much for coming in.
No, it's really my pleasure, my honor, and it's so exciting that radio stations want to talk about the arts. So I'm right there, fighting this battle with you.
It's about time, though,
Absolutely.
to highlight this.
Absolutely.
So perhaps a little introduction to yourself first.
Right.
From how you started dancing and how
Yes.
you got into the whole industry in KL.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really a very strange story, and it's a very long story, so I'll try to keep it tight.
Okay.
I really was never interested in dance. As a child, I was very athletic. I came from a very sports-orientated family. My sister actually ran for Malaysia and won gold medals at SEA Games. My brother-in-law played hockey for Malaysia at 4 Olympic Games. So
Wow.
it's this serious business.
Okay.
So I was always more interested in sports. But somehow in our school at La Salle Petaling Jaya, where I studied for 11 years and I'm very proud of it. So the school always encouraged young people to be involved in theatre, to do elocution, public speaking, debates and so on. And at the end of the year we'd always have these little skits that we'd have to do to entertain ourselves, So my teachers were very enthusiastic in trying to develop artistic skills as well in the young. And that's how it started, my interest. And I went on studying through school, and I went to University Malaya, where I did a degree in mathematics.
Mathematics?
Yeah,
Wow.
as a good Indian boy would, either you do maths, science, or you become a doctor or engineer, right? So this is kind of like the path that's set out for you. But at university, I felt really for the first time that this was not what I was meant to be doing. And I felt that there was an emptiness in myself and frustration about an education environment as well. Going from a very small school where you knew everyone to a very large university where you really didn't know anybody. And so it was a hard transition. And I was thinking that I needed something more, something to express myself and something to just develop myself as a young 20-year-old.
And numbers wasn't really doing it for you.
No, and certainly the lecturers were the least inspiring I've ever met in my life. They only talked to the blackboard. So I said, okay, this is it. I needed to do something. So I went around the campus looking at different organizations, societies that were good for students, so extracurricular activities. And one of the places that I found my calling eventually was this Kasuma, or Kesenian University Malaya.
Okay.
And the reason I decided that was interesting is because they traveled overseas, and until 1980, I'd hardly been anywhere except Morib, Johor Bahru, and maybe one trip to Singapore. So, I don't come from a privileged family. So when I joined this, and they said it was a dance group, so I had to audition, and I had to do Joget Inang Zapin Asli, which I didn't know, but the Arwah Said Manab, the late Said Manab, who was teaching, he said, "Oh, you're a genius, you're gifted, you're like Dr. Gauss, from University of Science." Because I had a beard as well at that time. So I said, okay, if you think so, great. I never actually believed it. But then I went on, and then my teacher said, oh, why don't you learn ballet, and why don't you learn jazz, and why don't you try all these other types of dance, which I did. And then I found I was traveling, I was excited, this was an interesting world. I was performing, and then I said, well, if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it well, and I wanted to do it right. So I went to the local ballet school at Federal Academy of Ballet, and then I did dance exams. Can you imagine a 24-year-old in tights with a beard? Not a pretty sight at that time with 10-year-old girls, So it was really the classic case for pedophilia, but thank God, I avoided that. And then I said, well, this is really exciting.
Yeah.
I'm doing this. So I wanted to do more. I didn't want to really be a big fish in a small pond. Not that I was a big fish, but I was doing a lot of performances already in the early 80s. And then I said, let me try to go overseas. But of course, money was an issue.
Yeah.
But I eventually managed to get a scholarship. I went to England. I did 3 years of training there, and then I did 2 years of musical theatre, being one of the very, very few Malaysians who's worked professionally in musical theatre in England.
In West End as
In the
well.
West End.
Yeah.
It was a really dream come true. But I was already 30 at that time,
Okay.
So I did everything a little bit late. Came back to Malaysia and then worked in a private ballet school. And then they said they were opening ASWARA, or ASK as it was known in 1994. They were looking for people who were trained in performing arts, and there were very few. So among my colleagues of the pioneering batch were Aida Reza, Sohaimi Magi, Lina Ang, and myself. All of us had come back from overseas at that time. So we were part of that founding group. And, 20 years later, I'm still at ASWARA and teaching amazing young kids, So in a nutshell, that's my journey.
And you were saying earlier that ASWARA is a place where once you step in, it's very hard for you to get out because of the whole atmosphere and energy.
Absolutely.
And what is your job specifically in ASWARA?
Yes, I'm the janitor. So I clean toilets.
Janitor of the dance rooms.
Yeah, I mean, you really need to do everything.
Right.
And you cannot imagine. So if I just compare it to Singapore, for example, Singapore has School of the Arts now, SOTA, which has state-of-the-art facilities. It is incredible. The auditoriums, the studios for dance, the studios for music was just phenomenal. If you're looking at the Royal Ballet School and international conservatoires, that's how they started, with this incredible building with wonderful teachers and so on. We had the software, we had the soft skills. The teachers were there, but we didn't have the infrastructure. So we were teaching in studios which were wobbly, which had holes, where the mirror was leaning against the wall. It was not on the wall, so it was really difficult, but it was so exciting. First time in Malaysia, you have literally a conservatoire of performing arts, tertiary education, finally being made available after the USM days of 1970s, because they did a lot of performing arts there at that time too. But here we were going to be concentrating on dance, theatre, music, film and writing and so on. So at ASWARA, I started off as a lecturer, and in 1998 they asked me to head the dance department. So then, of course, I went through a whole review of curriculum, looking at what was important, what I thought was important for young people to learn, and primarily my job is that still. So I've held this job for a long time. I love it. It involves a lot of administration, which I don't really like, but I get to really nurture young people. So I teach a lot. Actually, I teach theory subjects. I teach ballet, choreography, and so on. And I also try to empower young people by creating bridges for them. So I use my international and regional contacts a lot.
Right.
So I am the president of the dance committee from Seoul in Korea. So we have a large network. I'm the vice president of Southeast Asia, actually. And we have, again, a network. So networking is really critical, and that's really, I see, an important part of my job.
And what about ASWARA's role itself in performing arts? Because, of course, back then we had USM and then we had ASWARA that come up. Were there any other institutes, or were these two institutes were the ones that really shaped where the performing arts industry is now?
Yeah, that's a great thing to talk about. I think that the 70s, 80s really defined by University Science Malaysia, by the icons of performing arts like Dr. Gauss, Dr. Gulam. They were really untouchable, and they still are, actually. And then in 1994, the government decided to invest in performing arts, invest in an institution. And that was where ASK was born. And I think the 1990s was really critical because not just was ASWARA or ASK formed and established, but simultaneously you had Actor Studio that decided to create its private space. So I think these things worked very much in tandem with each other, you know, and it supported each other's efforts. So ASWARA really is a learning and institution. It's a performing arts institution that's catered primarily to train the young performer or the old performer. It doesn't really matter. We don't have an age limit, you know. So ASWARA, interestingly, has played a vital role in shaping the dance scene, most definitely. For some reason, we've always been at the forefront for dance, because we've had the most exciting choreographers work there. You know, Ida worked there for many years, Lina Ang, and these were Chuti Kwang, Lok Sek Kim, very, very exciting choreographers of the 90s. And then there was a transition into the new millennium when we had the input of people like Umesh Shetty from the Temple of Fine Arts. He moved and he's worked in ASWARA since then. So these important choreographers and teachers are really playing a critical role in shaping the industry. Marion De Cruz from Five Arts Center, she's a faculty member of the dance department as well. So ASWARA has really generated some of the most exciting young talent, undeniably. If you look at Kakistani's Bow Cameronian Awards, for example, in the last 10 years, I think 6 of the awards have been won by ASWARA graduates. So that's an indication that we are making a difference. The short and sweet competition by KL Pak is, you know, really quite dominated by ASWARA graduates or students. So we are seen at all the right places. We are invited to all the major local festivals. Of course, the industry is very small. We must realize that. And now what is exciting is that University Malaya has started their own performing arts program. So they do theatre, dance and music, and they have a postgraduate program which is very strong as well. And in 2014, I believe University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, UPSI, the teaching university, has opened its theatre and dance program. So you can see that it's really growing. University Malaysia Sabah and Sarawak both have performing arts programs, as does University Technology Mara. So tertiary education providing training for music is really, really well received. And there's another factor to it. It's because a lot of music graduates can then go on to become teachers in schools. Because music is a subject for the school curriculum, whereas dance and theatre isn't. So this is something that we could talk about as well.
When it comes to dance or music, any art forms, there is always sort of a division between tradition and the modern. And then in schools, they do approach in both ways. How do students perceive these two methods of teaching? Do they usually go for modern stuff, or they really want to preserve the traditional values?
Yes, thank you. I think that's a very important thing to talk about. And there seems to be a divide, as you mentioned, between the tradition and the contemporary or modern. But in ASWARA, what we have done is we have created a syllabus which I think is unique in this world. You know, it's not unique in Malaysia. It's a global phenomenon. Because what's happening is that anyone who comes to ASWARA has to learn the traditional Malay, Chinese and Indian dance, and they have to learn Bharatanatyam. They have to learn, I mentioned Indian dance, that's Bharatanatyam. They have to learn ballet and contemporary as well. So it's compulsory. There's no choice. There is sometimes a lot of resistance. Because the people who come in with perhaps a little bit more training in Malay dance don't really want to do Chinese dance or Indian dance. And those who come in with Indian dance don't really want to do another form. And those who come in with ballet really think traditions are so boring, you know. But what has happened is that we have some phenomenal examples, and I mean phenomenal. Ng Xing Ying, who came in with ballet training from Johor Bahru, studied all these different forms, and in 2013 performed her Arangetram in Bharatanatyam. And today she's received a full scholarship. She's in National University in Korea studying for her Masters of Performing Arts. So she's doing incredibly well. The jewel in our crown right now is another similar story of Fairul, who comes from Johor as well. Only learned Zapin before he came to ASWARA, and now he is at NYU, New York University, no less, doing his master's in performing arts on a full scholarship from Sime Darby. Now, isn't that phenomenal? That he was even accepted. He's only one of 12 accepted into the program, all from all over the world. So the training really works, and we are really excited. So I want the students to try to break this divide between the tradition and the modern, and to really understand that the body is able to speak many, many languages, and one does not need to sacrifice anything else in order to master one specific form. I think there's great ability, just like people can speak 5 languages. I think you can speak 5 languages of dance as well, But it's only the very phenomenally talented who can do that. So the others really excel maybe in one as opposed to another.
Right, so we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we will talk more to Mr. Joseph Gonzales. This is Anything Can Happen Friday, the art and culture side of Southeast Asia. Hello and welcome back to Durian ASEAN. You're still with Gowri
and Grace.
And this is our Anything Can Happen Friday. We have Mr. Joseph Gonzales in the house, who is very, very passionate about what he's saying. And the energy is just so high in here, which is great.
Yeah.
And for this part, we want to talk more about the way forward for the performing arts industry in Malaysia. And earlier you were giving a few examples about how it should be done at the policy level itself.
Yes.
And perhaps you could give a few examples on how we can do this.
Yes. I think that policy is something that we need to look at, and then obviously it goes without saying that the implementation of the policy is very critical as well. It needs to be implemented well, naturally. So, for example, in Singapore, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Australia, these are countries which have incredible structures that are set in place for artists. So in Korea, you have the Korean arts market. Australia has their arts market. You have the performing arts management agencies in these different countries that assist the artists in selling their product overseas. I think this is very important, and this is the way that Malaysia needs to move forward. Creating our artwork is the responsibility of the artist.
Yes.
But sometimes we need that kind of space, we need that kind of freedom, we need that kind of money in order to be able to do it. So why is Taiwan so successful with Cloudgate Dance Theatre? That is an internationally renowned dance company. It is also linked to their fight for independence, for their fight for an identity, for survival. The necessity for Malaysia now, I think, is to look at our multiculturalism. This is a commodity. You used that word just now. And we need to understand how valuable it is and invest in it. Not what I mean as a superficial tagline of tourism, which works and has its own space, but why are we not looking also at alternative models and looking at, for example, the work of Ramli Ibrahim through Sutra Dance Theatre, who has for the past 30 years produced exceptional dancers like Radhimala Govindaraju, January Lau, and so many more, Tan Mei Mei, for example, who are all of mixed race, but who are the most beautiful Odissi Bharatanatyam dancers that we could find. And invest in these people. Let them sell Malaysia. Let them go away and tell people, come to our country and see what we have. ASWARA is another wonderful example of what we can do. We have these young people like Naim Sharazad, like Fairul Zahid, who is in New York. We have upcoming dancers like Raziman Sarbini, Ervina Nishatika, who are so talented that we need to invest in them and use them as the example that we are going beyond ethnicity. It's not really only about the race anymore. It's just about being wonderful at the art form that you choose. And you could choose an art form which is not of your own ethnicity, you see. And I think this is what we need to sell. If we look at the other people that I like very much as examples of the best of Malaysia, would be like Rhythm in Bronze, the gamelan group. I mean, they are ridiculously talented.
They're really wonderful.
They're so wonderful. I mean, Shamini and Jillian and these amazing women, you know, are to die for, and their performances are top quality performances, and they're playing the gamelan.
Yep.
And then you have hands percussion, high energy Chinese drums, you know. Now I wish that they would get more ethnicities involved in playing the Chinese drums as opposed to just being Chinese. So we could sell that in a really different and market it and package it in a wonderful way for the world platform. And I really want to see, I mean, 15 years ago, and this is really not a new story, I went to the Metropolitan Opera House and I saw the Metropolitan staging 2 weeks of the Pony Pavilion, the Chinese opera. 2 weeks sold out.
Okay.
So my question is, when are we going to do Mak Yong?
Right.
When are we going to do Bangsawan? When are we going to do Wayang Kulit at these incredible theatres? And people want to rush for those tickets the same way that they would rush for tickets for Beyonce, for example.
Yes. Let's bring this up to Dr. Gulam.
Yes, absolutely.
The Mak Yong expert.
Yes, so I'm really very passionate that this is something that we could sell, that this is a very valuable Malaysian product. I mean, UNESCO has already recognized it as an oral and intangible heritage of the world, but I think we are not doing enough to then promote it to the next level.
There instead of keep pushing it and promoting it.
Absolutely, Gowri. So you have Rosnan Rahman now, who's a very passionate young man who's involved in Mak Yong. And we have Nozizi Zulkifli, just completed her PhD in University of Wollongong in Australia. And she has worked with Mak Yong as her basis, but using Shakespearean text. So this is something very exciting that we could sell. So, you know, last year I did a production called Becoming King, which also used Mak Yong, but looking at the entire process in a contemporary way of how to become the Pak Yong.
Right.
So it's so exciting. We have a rich minefield of incredible art that we need to then invest in more than what we are already doing, and then we need to market it and we need to sell it, you know. So we need to get those products so that we can sell it, and we need to interest the buyers the way they are interested in Thailand and their classical art, the way they are interested in Pichet Klun Chun, the Thailand contemporary artist, the way they are interested in Javanese gamelan or Balinese dance. So this is what we need to do for Malaysia, I really believe.
Okay. And before we wrap things up, do you have any final words for our listeners out there?
Yes, all of you need to register for a dance class as quickly as you can, or music, and find a cheap one, affordable one, but just to start appreciating music and dance, and find performances all across the country. For example, the Publica events that they do, a lot of it is free to the public. So come and watch the work of Pusaka. They bring in artists from all over the country doing traditional theatre. Learn about our own culture, and that's our identity, that's our root, that's our soul, and then play with it and do some exciting work with it. And if your child wants to become an artist, just let them. I think it's important to be happy. Life is short.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph Gonzales. It was amazing to have you in today. Thank you for all your insights.